creative writing program, I wrote a novel, which means I did not have an abundance of short fiction, so when Satish asked me to read here, I wrote some. These are two of the new stories that I wrote. First one is called Nightmare. For some, he is an impish demon sitting on your chest. He is heavy with the dark storm clouds of psyche, eager to drain you of your vitality, eager to fuck you to death. Incubus. For Sarah, it wasn't as cut and dried as a little pinky getting all of her dream space. Sarah could hear the second hand ticking away on the thick watch strapped to her wrist, every motion of that mechanism reminding her that she was still not asleep. She rolled over and freed one of her arms from the cocoon of warmth under her quilt to wake up her cell phone. 3 a.m. flipped to 3:01. She had one new email, so she checked it. The New York Times listing off its first round of headlines for the day. Mar 2013 liked one of her pictures on Instagram. She clicked on it. The selfie she'd taken in front of the museum. Her making a face in reference to some young guy sprawled out on a bench behind her, fast asleep. Asleep, like Sarah wanted to be. She put her phone to sleep. Her eyes took a moment to adjust to the blackness of the room, blackness that became grayness once her eyes began accepting all the faint light sources that were inescapable in the city, and forgetting the harshness of her phone's backlight. She closed her eyes. She was aware that her eyes were closed for quite a while. She had no idea how long because she refused to open them again to check, refused to start the cycle again. The hallway of school before her, she walked down it, a flutter of anxiety in her chest. There was something she'd forgotten, something important. It was endless, the hallway. The soft focus wall sconces became harsh fluorescent strips flickering from the ceiling. The absurdly patterned carpet, mesmerizing in its garishness, decayed as she studied it, revealing cracked concrete underneath. Long pipes now ran along the corridor, bleeding rust down the walls. Sarah quickened her pace. Every barefooted step on the dank floor transferred more of the damp cold deep into her. She shivered in her cotton yoga pants and old t-shirt. She reached a point in the hallway where the lights just stopped. Sarah stood there, her toes touching the edge of the known world. She could feel the pull of forever tugging at her, coiling its fingers around her, clawing at her. Her heart jumped into her throat. She turned to go back, but saw the lights going out one by one. Darkness was catching up, was flanking her. She was trapped. Something moved by her feet, dark and rough. She looked down and saw the floor shifting, but it wasn't the floor that moved. No, the floor was covered with snakes. They slithered over her feet and coiled around her ankles. They gripped tighter and held fast. The snakes grew cold and hard. She crouched down, searching with her fingers, afraid to look. Steel chains were wrapped around her ankles. Her heart thumped hard in her chest. Her body vibrated. She was afraid. There was no end to the chain. Nothing to unravel or unwrap. It pulled taut, securing somewhere in the darkness that surrounded her, and then kept pulling. Unbalanced, it tipped her over. She nearly fell into the abyss. Sarah lay face down on the cold concrete floor. The grit rubbed rough against her cheek and smelled of motor oil. She felt a hand on the center of her back pressing with heavy, steady pressure. She had trouble taking in a breath. Sarah. Her voice made of nails hissed. One of the pipes burst, letting off an ear-piercing screech of steam. Sarah felt a steady rumbling through the floor. The pipe screeched again with another accompanying rumble. Sarah could feel his hot breath against her neck, its rough, cracked lips brushing against her ear. Soon, it said. Tomorrow. Sarah opened her eyes, and her hand slipped the cozy comfort of her quilt sounds, the alarm on her phone. A sheen of sweat covered her body, clinging the sheets to her. Already the dream's details were slipping away, leaving her unsettled, uneasy, tired. This one's a little different. It's called Love in Passing. The party was adult and the music was audible but not overpowering, and you could hear what was being said by the person you were talking to. You might not care, and you might wish that the music drowned them out, but there you were, having adult conversations. It was a beautiful loft apartment in an old warehouse that had been gutted and repurposed for affordable living for artists. The artist that was hosting the party was an experimental musician who created gorgeously textured tracks with everything and anything, from a toy piano to a 5-gallon pail to sandpaper blocks and a bicycle horn. Genius, many agreed. The results varied from melodic and haunting to ear-splitting and headache-inducing was inconsequential. Jim was there with a friend, Beat, who knew the musician through some theater collaborations. Beat was impossibly trendy, and she knew everyone in the artist community. She had a habit of being so engaging that regardless of how much Jim might rather be sitting in the corner with a notebook, working out how exactly he meant to extricate himself from the blind alley he'd written himself into, she could still manage to drag him into the middle of the dance floor and make the shuffling and coordinated shrugging he was doing feel like actual dancing. Beat also had the knack of meeting every new person in any room she might be in, and then introducing them as if she'd known them for years, and somehow have this warmth and connection feel so well worn that years of stories seem to have been encapsulated in seconds. "Hello," Beat said to one young woman with blue and violet hair. "I absolutely love your hair." Bowled over by Beat's enthusiasm, the young woman responded with a shell-shocked, "Thank you." That was followed shortly by a more welcoming, "I don't think I know you yet. I'm Alice." "Alice, it is lovely to meet you. I'm Beat." I'm sorry, did you just say Beat?" "Yes, my parents loved Much Ado and named me Beatrice, but that's just so stale." "Sometimes, yes," Beat said. "Sometimes it's perfect. Tonight especially, it doesn't go with my jaunty yellow beret." "I love it, by the way," Alice said. Already they were best friends. "Jim gave it to me," Beat said. "You must meet Jim." And Jim was dragged into the conversation from the outskirts, over by the snack table and the bottles of wine, directly into the conversation itself. Introductions continued. "I'm Alice." Jim extended his hand. "I'm Jim." "Jim is a writer," Beat said. "Have I read your stuff?" Alice asked. "It's possible, I suppose," Jim said. "I've done some music journalism and written some comic books. I've also done a couple of books." "He's being modest," Beat said. "He wrote Entropy and Coffee, which won a Hugo, and Blacklight, which was shortlisted for a National Book Award." "Okay, I know the National Book Award, or I've heard of it," Alice said. "But what's a Hugo?" "It's like the Oscars for sci-fi and fantasy books," Beat said. "What manner of madness do you participate in?" Jim asked, trying to cleverly remove himself from the spotlight. "Musician," she said. "Ever listen to Wonderland? Sort of a punk pop sound with strings?" Alice laughed. "I suppose that's as good a categorization as I can hope to get." "Well, I've heard a few songs," Jim said, smiling. "You're quite good." "Thank you," Alice replied with a curtsy. "I'm the cello and the piano, and some of the vocals." "Some of the vocals," he said. "Okay, most of the vocals," she replied. Beat faded back into the party. At some point, the host, while possibly high, stripped down to his underwear and played the entire Born in the USA album with a guitar and duck call. He was joined by someone on a violin and someone else on a guitar. Jim and Alice sat on the couch and talked as the motion of the party swirled around them, oblivious to all of it. Alice was in Boston on a tour. She had been traveling for 2 months. Jim was in Minneapolis, and before that he had been in Tokyo, Toronto, Seattle, and Atlanta for conferences and conventions. He'd done a speaking engagement in Denver, and that was when he and Alice had last crossed paths, 1 month before, when they finally had a proper date. Dinner, a film, a concert, a bottle of wine in his hotel suite. They'd fallen asleep on the couch. Neither one of them had thought it odd that their first proper date had occurred nearly a month after they first had sex, nor that when they would wake up, he would get on a plane headed west, while she would get on a bus headed east. Since that date, 173 messages had passed between them on Twitter. They had accumulated 347 text messages. They talked on the phone every few days. He wore a scarf and a sweater and wrote 3,000 words for a novel that was due to his publisher in 2 months. She was sweat-slicked in her bra playing cello in a club for an audience of 1,000 people. Alice was with Jim for the opening night performance of Beat's play in Washington, D.C. She had a day off of her tour and had flown in. He had taken the train down from New York after a meeting with his agent and publisher about the promotional campaign for his new book. The performance, an adaptation of Medea set in contemporary America with Medea as a congresswoman, was well received. They attended the opening night gala, replete with artists, writers, arts advocates, and more than a few shell-shocked politicians. They were photographed together for the first time. With Beat's permission and best wishes, they snuck away from the party and had a late dinner at a nearby restaurant. They took the long way, a short driving tour of the Capitol sites before Alice got on a plane to rejoin her tour, and Jim returned to Beat's apartment to sleep on the couch for a few hours before he got into another plane, departed for Los Angeles to begin working on a screenplay. Alice was on stage in Australia when she took the opportunity presented by Wonderland's guitarist changing guitars from Skype to Skype Jim from her phone. He listened to her cello part on Gloria's Changes, and then was able to see her when she moved to the piano and placed the phone on the mic stand for Mad Sunsets. He wrote, "I love you," on a page in his notebook in the house he was staying in Silver Lake, and she saw it in Melbourne. They never said a word. Jim's friend, novelist Eli Field, was having a birthday party in Cleveland when Alice and Jim decided to get married. They co-opted the celebration with Eli's friends, who were also Jim's friends, and got married in the living room. Eli officiated as he'd been ordained online a year before for another friend's wedding. Beat was Skyped in on Jim's phone, and Alice's sister Skyped in on her phone. They went down to the courthouse the next day with Eli to file paperwork. He told them that it was the best use of his birthday that he could think of. "How do you do it?" a reporter asked Alice when she was in Los Angeles for the Grammys. Wonderland's album had been nominated for an award. It didn't win. "What do you mean?" Alice asked. "Your marriage. You're rarely together in the same place. The world follows along via Twitter. How do you do it?" "We just do," Alice said. "We see each other hand for a few hours or a few days, and then we go off and we make our art. With everything available to us, we're hardly apart even when we're not together. And I hardly think the world is really following us." Jim woke up in the bed next to him was empty. They had long since stopped trying to wake each other up for trips to the airport in the early morning hours. He could still smell her on the sheets, in the air. On the way to the bathroom, he saw one of Alice's socks on the floor, lost in her hurried departure. 3 years they'd been married. Jim turned on the bathroom light, and in lipstick, "I love you," was written on the mirror. Alice had told him about an interviewer that asked her how they did it. Some magazines were already trying to pair her up with somebody else, another famous face. America didn't care enough about writers to try and do the same with him. They did it with little notes on Twitter or written in fountain pen on a notebook page. It happened with socks left on the stairs and messages left on mirrors. They did it through their books and their songs. Each was a message, and each message, regardless of the words or lack thereof, said the same thing. "I love you, and I wish we didn't have to be apart. But I'm happy that we can still be in love, even when we're apart." He went downstairs and put on a pot of coffee, prepared to work. He planned to get a few pages written before his cell phone chirped with the message that she had landed and that she missed him. And their glorious affair would continue.